Versioning is a way of keeping track of all your documents, and it's very useful in situations where you have multiple people collaborating together. So suppose we have a couple of people who are working on a project together, Alice and Bob, right? And they decide that they're going to write a report about the project. So Alice starts off and creates the first version of the document, and she writes the initial draft. Okay, so that's the first version of the document, and then she sends it to Bob to have a look at, and Bob looks through it and he says, yeah, that's pretty good, but I want to make some changes. I want to replace the introduction here with something else, and then while he's doing that, Alice also goes and makes some other changes. So maybe she decides she's going to insert a table here or something. Alright, so now we've got a bit of a problem because we've got two different versions of the document and we only want one. So we want to produce a final version which incorporates the changes made by both Bob and Alice. And what this will look like is we'll have Bob's changes up here, and then the stuff that neither of them changed, and then Alice's table down here. So we need a way to combine these documents, and this is called a merge. Okay, so let's think about how versions are represented. So when you normally create a document on your computer, you start off, and when you save the first version, that gets put into a new file. Okay, so we say we've got the first version there, and we'll call that version 1. Okay, now if you make some changes to it, normally what will happen after you save it is that the old version will get overwritten and the second version will be put in its place, right? And you know that continues on. If you continue to make more changes and so forth, you'll end up with version 3 and version 4, 5, 6 and so forth. So that's how things normally work. If you're using a version control system though, what that does is it keeps track of all the versions of your file. So you've got version 2 and you've got version 1 as well. And you can think about the relationships between these where if we draw an arrow between two versions, that means that one is based on the other. So a circle is a version and an arrow means based on. So in this case, version 2 is based on version 1, version 3 is based on version 2. So let's return to our situation with Bob and Alice. So let's say that Alice has created her document and she saved it a couple of times and she's ended up with what is version 3, like we've got here. And we need to think about what happens when she sends the document to Bob and they both go making changes. Well, that's going to be version 4, right? So we've got Alice's version here, and I'm going to call this A4. And Bob makes his changes, and he also creates a version 4, but I'm going to call that B4, just to distinguish it from Alice's version. Now both A4 and B4 are based on the version 3 that Alice originally had. So we can add them to the diagram, and at the moment what we've got is in a straight line, so we call that linear versioning. But that's about to change because we now have A4 here, which is based on version 3, and we also have B4, which is Bob's version, which is also based on version 3. So this is called nonlinear versioning because it's branched out in two different directions. And what we want to get is the final version, which we're going to call version 5, which is based on A4 and B4, which means that it incorporates the changes that were made in both versions. So this is the final one that we want to end up with. So this process of merging two documents together, as I mentioned before, is called a merge. and there's a number of different ways to do that. Usually that involves taking the original version and both modified versions to produce the final version. And I'm going to be talking in my next video about how we do that.